You're a disgrace to the uniform, Captain Storm. She didn't flinch when they stripped her of her ribbons. Didn't speak when they read the charges. Just sat there in her dress blues, spine straight, those piercing blue eyes fixed on something beyond the courtroom walls, something none of them could see. In the gallery, officers whispered. A few smirked. One colonel shook his head in disgust. To them, she looked like just another beautiful woman who'd cracked under pressure. A deserter, hiding behind perfect features, and a storm that never came. But what no one knew, what not even the judge understood, was that the woman in chains had spent 8 months in the deepest cover operation in military history. And the only person who knew the truth wore 4 stars on his shoulder and was already racing toward the courthouse. Welcome to Quiet Tales Studio. Before we continue this story of the trail, honor, and the deadliest secret ever classified, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you think stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're growing every day, and we sincerely thank you for being part of it.
The Fort Bragg military courthouse stood like a monument to military justice, its imposing columns casting shadows across the morning courtyard. Inside courtroom A, the air hung thick with tension. Captain Lyra Storm sat at the defendant's table in her Army service dress blues, the dark navy fabric contrasting with her platinum blonde hair, pulled back in a regulation bun that revealed sharp cheekbones, full lips, and those piercing blue eyes that had once struck fear into enemy hearts across 3 continents. Her ribbons had been ceremonially removed that morning, leaving faint impressions where decorations for valor once rested. Her captain's bars remained on her shoulders, though everyone knew they wouldn't be there much longer. She wore only a simple silver chain around her neck, its pendant hidden beneath her uniform, a token holding more secrets than anyone in this room could imagine. Major Jessica Crawford, her defense counsel, sat beside her looking increasingly uncomfortable. Crawford was competent but completely out of her depth. She'd tried repeatedly to get Storm to open up about Syria 8 months ago, but the captain remained silent as stone. All Crawford had was the official record, and that painted Storm as a coward and deserter. At the prosecution table, Colonel Marcus Reeves reviewed his notes. A career prosecutor with 23 years in the Army, he saw Storm as everything wrong with modern military leadership. Beautiful women given commands they couldn't handle, cracking under pressure when real soldiers needed them. The gallery was packed with officers from across Fort Bragg. Most noticeable was Colonel David Archer in the 3rd row, Storm's former commanding officer from the 75th Rangers. Archer was a legend in special operations circles. His presence here was curious. Storm had been transferred from his command 6 months before Syria. Why was he here, and why did he look so uncomfortable? Near the back sat Dr. Sarah Kim in civilian clothes, appearing to be a journalist taking notes. Most officers ignored her completely. But Dr. Kim wasn't a journalist. She was CIA, and she was terrified. Judge Advocate General Robert Pierce entered at precisely 0900 hours, his presence commanding immediate respect. He'd been presiding over military courts for 15 years, but even he seemed troubled by this case, constantly checking his secure phone. "This court-martial will come to order," Pierce announced. "We are here to adjudicate charges against Captain Lyra Storm. Desertion in the face of the enemy, dereliction of duty resulting in death, and conduct unbecoming an officer." The charges sent ripples through the gallery. Desertion in the face of the enemy was one of the most serious charges in military law. Storm showed no reaction, sitting perfectly still, blue eyes fixed beyond the judge's head, like a woman who had already accepted her fate. Colonel Reeves rose for opening statements, moving with practiced confidence. "Members of the court, 8 months ago, Captain Storm was given command of 12 elite soldiers for an extraction mission in northern Syria. Instead, on March 15th, she abandoned her post during a firefight, leaving 12 brave men to die while she fled to safety." He turned to face Storm directly, contempt evident. "The evidence will show she is simply a woman given more responsibility than she could handle. When the moment of truth came, she failed completely." The sexist undertone wasn't lost on anyone. Several female officers shifted uncomfortably while others nodded in agreement. Major Crawford's opening was weak in comparison. Captain Storm is a decorated officer with 12 years of exemplary service. Her actions were not those of a coward, but of a leader making impossible decisions under impossible circumstances. But she was fighting with both hands tied. Large portions of Storm's record were classified beyond her clearance level. The prosecution calls Sergeant First Class Anthony Martinez. Martinez, one of 2 survivors from Storm's unit, walked to the stand with a pronounced limp. A permanent reminder of that night in Syria, his testimony was devastating. "We breached the compound and immediately took heavy fire," he said, his voice carrying remembered trauma. The intelligence was completely wrong. There were at least 30 hostiles with crew-served weapons. It was like they were waiting for us. Where was Captain Storm during this firefight? Initially with the command element, coordinating our response. But then she just disappeared. One minute she was there giving orders, the next minute she was gone. A collective intake of breath echoed through the courtroom. "How long were you left without command?" 6 hours, Martinez said bitterly. 6 hours fighting for our lives, while our commanding officer was nowhere to be found. By the time extraction came, 10 of my brothers were dead. The raw emotion in his voice resonated through the courtroom. This was exactly what the prosecution needed. On cross-examination, Crawford tried to salvage something. "You said the intelligence was wrong. How wrong?" "Very wrong, ma'am. We expected 5 to 10 lightly armed guards. Instead, we walked into a reinforced position. It felt like a setup." "Did you share these concerns with Captain Storm?" "Yes, ma'am. She asked a lot of questions about the intelligence source during briefing. She seemed suspicious of the whole thing." It was a small crack in the prosecution's narrative, but not enough. Corporal Beck, the other survivor, corroborated Martinez's account with heartbreaking details about how their teammates died, how Sergeant Torres died trying to reach Storm's position, how Specialist Chen bled out calling for medevac that never came. During lunch recess, Crawford made one final attempt to get her client to talk. In the secure conference room, she spread files across the table. "Captain, I need something, anything, to counter their narrative. What really happened that night?" Storm looked up with those intense blue eyes. "Major, there are things about that mission you don't have clearance to know." "Then get me clearance. Give me something to work with." "I can't do that." "Why not? They're going to convict you. You're going to prison unless you give me something to fight with." Storm was quiet, then spoke softly. "Because some secrets are worth more than one person's career. Some missions matter more than one person's reputation." Crawford stared in frustration. "Have you wondered why my service record has so many gaps? Why Colonel Archer is here? Why Dr. Kim has been taking pictures of everyone? Why Judge Pierce keeps checking his secure phone?" Crawford felt a chill. "What are you saying? This trial is about more than Syria. There are people in that courtroom who know exactly what I did that night, and they're praying I don't tell the truth." The afternoon brought technical testimony, satellite footage showing Storm's heat signature moving away from the compound minutes after her last radio contact. It looked like irrefutable proof of desertion. Dr. Kim watched with growing unease, checking her encrypted phone for authorization that hadn't arrived. She knew about Ghost Protocol, about the network they'd been hunting, about the assets Storm had been protecting. But revealing any of it would compromise ongoing operations still saving lives. "Major Crawford, are you ready to present your case?" Crawford had almost nothing. "Your Honor, the defense calls Captain Lyra Storm." Storm walked to the witness stand with fluid grace, even in disgrace moving with confidence earned in the world's most dangerous places. "Captain Storm, please state your rank and assignment." "Captain Lyra Storm, United States Army, currently assigned to the Defense Intelligence Agency." "How long have you served?" 12 years, 4 months. "Can you describe your training and qualifications?" "Ranger qualified, Airborne qualified, Special Forces qualified, advanced certifications in combat medicine, foreign languages, and specialized warfare techniques." "Which languages do you speak?" Arabic, Farsi, Russian, Mandarin, and several regional dialects Pashto. This drew murmurs. These weren't typical qualifications for a standard army captain. Can you describe what happened March 15th? Storm scanned the courtroom, her eyes stopping on Dr. Kim, Colonel Archer, then Judge Pierce's secure phone. I'm limited in what I can discuss due to classification restrictions. Why did you leave the compound? I received intelligence indicating the mission was fundamentally compromised. I made a tactical decision to pursue an alternative course of action. What kind of intelligence? I cannot discuss the source or content in open court. Colonel Reeves objected immediately. The defendant can't claim classification to avoid explaining her actions. Sustain, Pierce ruled, though he looked troubled. Captain Storm, you need to be more specific. Storm met his gaze steadily. Your Honor, there are operational security concerns that override my personal legal situation. I'm ordering you to explain your actions that night. For the first time, Storm showed something other than calm resignation. Something dangerous flickered in those blue eyes. Your Honor, she said quietly, some orders cannot be followed, regardless of who gives them. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Crawford tried to salvage the situation. Can you tell us whether your actions were intended to help your soldiers? Everything I did was designed to protect American lives, Storm replied with the first real passion she'd shown. But I understand that from the outside, without context, it looks like abandonment. If you could explain the full truth, would it change how people see your actions? Storm's expression grew distant. The full truth would change everything. But it would also result in the deaths of people still out there, still serving, still sacrificing. Some secrets are worth more than one person's freedom. But Reeves destroyed her credibility on cross-examination. Without details, without context, Storm's actions looked exactly like desertion born of cowardice. You claim you received intelligence about a compromise. From whom? I cannot answer that. You claim you pursued an alternative course of action. What action? I cannot answer that. You claim everything you did was to protect American lives, yet 10 soldiers died while you were absent. How do you reconcile that? For the first time, Storm's composure cracked. Those deaths will haunt me forever, every single one of them. But not enough to prevent them by staying with your unit? Colonel, you don't understand the full operational picture. Then explain it. Stop hiding behind classification and explain why their brothers had to die. Storm looked around the courtroom, at Dr. Kim frantically typing, at Colonel Archer's pale face, at Judge Pierce staring at his secure phone with growing alarm. I cannot, she said simply. During the final recess, Dr. Kim received the message she'd been waiting for. Her face went white as she read it. Dr. Kim, Colonel Archer approached. We need to talk. In an empty conference room, he closed the door. You got authorization? Kim nodded. But it might be too late. Ghost Protocol is still active. If Storm talks. She won't. She'll go to prison before compromising the mission. That's what I'm afraid of. The asset she protected? He's prevented 6 major terrorist attacks. We've rolled up 37 cells based on her work. And 10 minutes ago, we intercepted chatter. Her cover's about to be blown. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. She has to know Ghost Protocol is being shut down tonight. That she can finally tell the truth. Colonel Reeves delivered a masterful closing argument, painting Storm as a beautiful coward who'd cracked under pressure. Captain Storm wants you to believe she's protecting some great secret. But the evidence shows desertion, plain and simple. Crawford's closing was passionate but doomed. Without classified information or character witnesses, she could only ask the court to trust there was more to the story. The panel deliberated quickly. When they returned, Storm was found guilty on all charges. Judge Pierce looked at her with what might have been regret. Before I pronounce sentence, do you have anything to say? Storm stood slowly, scanning the courtroom one final time. She saw Dr. Kim frantically typing, Colonel Archer's anguished face, and Judge Pierce's secure phone receiving urgent messages. Something in the atmosphere began to shift. Storm straightened her shoulders and smiled, a cold, predatory expression that reminded everyone she'd once been one of the most dangerous people in the world. "Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying a new edge, "I have 2 words for this court." She leaned toward the microphone, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Ghost protocol." The reaction was immediate and electric. Dr. Kim dropped her tablet, face going white. Colonel Archer shot to his feet. Several officers reached for their phones while others stared in shock. But the most dramatic reaction came from Judge Pierce himself, his face drained of color as he stared at Storm, the secure phone vibrating with urgent messages. "Did you just say what I think you said?" he asked, voice barely steady. Storm's smile widened. "Your Honor, I believe your secure phone has a message that might interest this court." Pierce pulled out his phone with trembling hands. As he read the message, his expression transformed from shock to something approaching awe. "Bailiff," he said, voice cracking, "clear the courtroom. Everyone except essential personnel, out. Now." "Your Honor, what's happening?" Colonel Reeves demanded. Pierce looked at the prosecutor with something like pity. "Colonel, this trial is about to become classified far above your clearance level." As the courtroom cleared, Dr. Kim approached the bench, showing CIA identification. "Your Honor, I have authorization from the Director of Central Intelligence to brief you on certain classified matters." Pierce nodded, still staring at Storm in disbelief. "I think I'm beginning to understand why Captain Storm has been so cooperative with her own conviction." Dr. Kim pulled out a thick folder marked with classification levels that made everyone swallow hard. "Your Honor, 8 months ago, Captain Storm didn't desert her post. She began the most successful counterterrorism operation in CIA history." The truth finally came out. Storm had spent 8 months undercover, infiltrating a terrorist network that had been planning attacks across 3 continents. The desertion had been the start of a deep cover mission that required her to disappear completely, to let her own soldiers believe she had abandoned them while she worked to save thousands of other lives. The asset she'd been protecting had provided intelligence that prevented 6 major terrorist attacks. The network she'd mapped had led to the capture of 37 terrorist cells. Her sacrifice, her willingness to be seen as a coward and deserter, had saved hundreds of American lives. The mission was finally over. The terrorists had been captured. The network dismantled. Storm was free to tell the truth, but only after enduring months of disgrace, a court-martial, and the hatred of her fellow soldiers. As the classified briefing continued, it became clear that Captain Lyra Storm wasn't a deserter or a coward. She was a hero who had been willing to sacrifice everything, her reputation, her career, her freedom, to protect a mission larger than herself. She had let the world think the worst of her to save lives that would never know her name. That was the real Storm, not her failure, but her incredible strength in bearing undeserved shame for the greater good. The woman they had called a disgrace to the uniform had actually upheld its highest ideals. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't found in glory, but in the willingness to be misunderstood by history while serving something greater than yourself. Captain Lyra Storm had weathered that storm and emerged not as the coward they thought she was, but as the hero she had always been.